quick, plyometrics. What do you think about when I say that? Now, most likely, an image of somebody leaving the ground, jumping, came into your mind. That's a common part of plyometrics. Plyometrics are explosive movements, but when we think of plyometrics, we typically think of jumping. Well, that's right. There's a lot of jumping involved in quite a bit of plyometrics, especially when it comes to athletes. The ability to leave the ground fast, explosively, being able to get higher is very important in a lot of sports. But what kind of jumping? Is there more to it than that? There is a true why, where, and how when it comes to jumping and plyometrics, and we're covering it today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast. Good day and welcome to Personalized Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personalized Fitness and your host of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. With me today, as always, when we're talking about exercise, is our exercise coordinator, Charlie Merlot. Charlie, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Continuing talking about what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, which of course is plyometrics and specifically jumping. Now, before we get going on this, I want to tell you how to get in touch with the show in case you have any questions concerning this topic or any other, or as always, if you have any questions dealing with dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please contact us, area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. Also, you can reach out to me at Garrett, Garrett, at personalizedfitness.com. That's my email address, personalizedfitness.com. Of course, it's our website, Personalized Fitness, our Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter, or if you want to call it X, hit us up at Team PE. Reach out to us there if you'd like to. Also, I wanted to tell you that I got contacted a few weeks ago via email because of the podcast on a group that wanted a speaker to come out and speak on a topic. They actually wanted me to speak on the live food. And I wanted to tell you, if you belong to a church group or a civic organization, need a speaker, and are looking for somebody to speak on health, fitness, and wellness, I would love to come and join you. I can speak on a myriad of topics, but two most sought after happen to be the live age and the live food, and love to share that with your organization. Now, back to what we're talking about today in plyometrics. When you say, like I said in the intro, people think about somebody leaving the ground when they're talking about plyometrics. Evidently, they're thinking of jumping. But is that all we're talking about, just kind of just jumping up and down? Because this is going to be a real short podcast if that's the case there, buddy.
Right, yeah. And most people probably would think, vertical jump. That's the main thing that they think about when they hear about plyometrics. But believe it or not, there's a lot more to it.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. I didn't want to have to tap dance for the middle of the rest of this show. Go ahead, pal. So what are we talking about? What are the variations?
Yeah, so for us, we break down our plyometric training into three categories. The first, like we just mentioned, being vertical. The second is horizontal. And the last one would be lateral. And so those are our three big categories that we try to constantly rotate and always keep implementing into the training. So, okay, give me a quick example of it in sport. Like, I mean, obviously, anybody's going to think of, when a vertical jump. I mean, I'm short, and I'm still going to think of, basketball. Shooting a foul shot or shooting a shot for basketball for a vertical jump. Well, what about the others? Yeah, so basketball is a big one. Another big vertical sport would be volleyball. So, jumping up over the net. Those are two that immediately come to mind. And,
sure.
As far as horizontal goes, probably the most common is going to be sprinting. It's a horizontal based movement. You're not propelling your force up. You're trying to push back forward to propel yourself forward. So the horizontal plyometrics is going to carry over a lot to sprinting.
Okay.
And then lateral, obviously, when you think change of direction, lateral cutting, agility, that type of thing, we're preparing those tissues for the demand that's going to happen in sport. And something that we often say when we're programming is, look, we're trying to train movements, not muscles, in the sense that we're trying to put them in similar positions that they would be during their sport. Right. And we're not just trying to say, all right, we want to train the quads here, we want to train the glutes. But no, we're trying to train the squat pattern, the hinge pattern. We're trying to train this specific angle that they're going to be cutting in their sport. And that's where you're going to see the carryover between the weight room and on the field or court.
Sure. How do you break down each one of those jumps? How do you program that? How do you put that together?
Yeah, so the way we run sessions is we often do supersets, so we pair exercises together.
Sure.
And we have different stages, as we've already talked about in our athletic development program. So
Right.
depending on the development of the athlete and where they are physically and I guess in their maturity level,
Sure.
that dictates their training as well. But it definitely varies. But we oftentimes will superset an exercise that is in the similar, I guess, realm of what the plyometric would be. So for an example, for our vertical plyometrics, we often pair those with a squat pattern because you're doing a similar motion. The squat is more of a vertical movement, and then the vertical jump, again, is vertical. So you've got one where you're training it with weights, and then you go and do it without resistance. And so the idea is it's going to carry over between the two. Likewise, with horizontal, it's more of an acceleration-based plyometric.
Right.
Again, like we just talked about running, and so we would oftentimes pair a deadlift variation with horizontal jump.
Sure.
Kind of like a broad jump.
Sure.
And then the last one would be lateral in the sense that change of direction based, so a lot of lateral cutting, and that one can really be paired with any exercise, deadlift, squat. But the main thing is you always keep a rotation, and we keep the variety in the program.
Well, and so many times we talk about the mental side of what we do. We talk about it a couple of different ways, and dealing with prefrontal cortex, and then also we're dealing with the cerebellum. I'm going somewhere with this. Give me a second. We talk about the fact that nobody comes to us for a physical reason. Everybody comes forward to us for a mental reason. That's more prefrontal cortex. But in your world, what you're talking about here, speak to how that works as far as, instead of just doing static lifting, to train a muscle and get it stronger. Yeah. But what happens when you do the plyometric training as far as the cerebellum, as far as the brain is concerned? How does that relate? How does that improve the athlete?
Yeah, so like we've already mentioned before, plyometrics have a great carryover to coordination.
Sure.
It's not just speed and power, but learning how to manipulate your body in a way that you can quickly cut from one foot to the next, that type of thing. There's a lot of carryover because you're doing that a lot in sport, right? And so plyometrics, like we mentioned last podcast, is really the bridging of the gap between the weight room and the field, because it's the most similar to what you're doing during your sport. And so, I definitely say the weight room is great. You will definitely want to work on strength, because I believe that strength is a very low hanging fruit for a lot of young athletes, and a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Sure.
So strength is, if you bring up your strength, more than not, it's going to bring up all your other qualities as well. So strength and power. So really, when it comes down to your plyometrics, what we're trying to work is trying to think of the best way to put it. So if you've got max strength on one end of the spectrum and then you've got max speed on the other, we've talked about this in the podcast before, the plyometrics is going to be somewhere in the middle, right?
Okay.
And so you want to train all aspects of the spectrum. You want to work max strength, but you also want to work max speed, power. And so you're just trying to ride the wave in a sense, and hit all those different qualities. And that way you don't get, one athlete who is really strong, but he's slow as crap and can't move well. And then you've got another athlete who he's really fast, but he's not robust. He's not. He can't withstand injury because his tissues and his muscles are not able to withstand the demand of the sport. So you just kind of have to, always keep a variety is what we try to do. Just that way, whatever they take on during their sport, they've already been exposed to it.
And not only, and I'm kind of going a little bit off topic. We didn't talk about this, but we talked about that, like you say, in the first podcast, in marrying the strength and the speed, kind of the connecting part of that is plyometrics, and but at the same time, building strength through plyometrics. I mean, speak to that a bit. I mean, because you can build some serious strength through plyometric work.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think back to COVID, right? When nobody had exercise equipment. I mean, you're stuck at home, and it's like, what do I do? I either exercise or I go and walk with my family. I mean, people are trying to find stuff to do, but gym equipment is at it's very scarce, right? Nobody can find it, and so what do you do when all you have is bodyweight exercises? Plyometrics, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, jump squats, you do lunge jumps, things like that. And it's a great form of, you can use it in a cardio sense to get
Sure.
their heart rate up and more of an interval style workout. But really the way, you know, we train it for athletes is, yeah, a lot of people think, you know, the more tired I am, the better workout it is.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case with power training. So what we're looking for is when you're doing a rep, we want max effort, max intent. So whenever you're going to do a jump, it's got to be all in 100%, because if you're not pushing that envelope a little bit further, then really you're not making any gains, because you're not getting to that point where your body is straining all out. So that's one way that we can really teach, you know, max intent and max effort through plyometrics, especially with our younger group.
Sure.
With our youth development and our fundamentals stages, because, you know, a lot of them, they're still learning their bodies. They haven't quite figured out to, you know, how do I really put all my effort into something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we try to use, you know, verbal cues and visual cues, like, you know, try to jump through the roof, or when we're slamming a medicine ball, you know, try to bust this ball. If you bust this rall, you know, like, you know, you reward them with something, right?
Exactly.
So like try to like give them ideas to, you know, how do you make them think, okay, I got to give my all to do this, right? And so that's one way, you know, teaching plyometrics or using plyometrics is a great way to teach maximal effort, and that will carry over, you know, as they mature and as they get into the weight room. And so definitely a lot more benefits than just, you know, when you think speed and power. It's a great teaching tool as well.
Absolutely. And you know, you horizontal, you have vertical, horizontal, and lateral. Give me some ideas of some exercise, and you're probably going to maybe even put a video with this later. Well, you already did some of these, I know, on the plyometrics, but give us some ideas of some exercises, not just lifting exercises, but actually the bounding, the jumping exercises that you use for each one of those.
Sure, yeah. So starting with vertical, one that most people probably think about is a box jump. And the box jump is a great tool, mainly because it's another visual cue to where, you know, if you put a 12-inch box in front of somebody and they jump and it's easy, and you say, okay, I'm gonna put a 24-inch box in front of you, right? And so then now they're like, whoa, like this is a lot higher. And so, you know, if you kept jumping on that 12-inch box, they might not give max effort because they're like, oh, this is easy. But if you put that 24-inch box in front of them, they're like, all right, I really got to jump high now. So that is another teaching tool that we use. And, you know, as they learn, you know, to put that max intent into it, it's going to carry over to other parts of training as well. So box jumps is a big vertical jump. We use a lot of weighted jumps. So like we talked about earlier, riding that spectrum. So when you load a jump, you know, you're making your body weight heavier, which in a sense is whenever you go to jump unloaded, it's going to be easier, because, you know, we'll do a lot of contrast where you'll jump with a weight and then you'll sit it down, then jump without a weight. And so the idea is that you're going to feel a lot lighter when you're not restricted by the weight. And so that's going to carry over as well. And then, with horizontal, a big one is the broad jump. Like I said, horizontal based jumps carry over a lot to sprinting because it's acceleration based. We're trying to push force backwards into the ground. And so broad jumps, a lot of single leg broad jumps. Bounding is a big one, skips. All that is great for coordination. And then lastly, with the lateral bounds or the lateral plyometrics, we do lateral bounds, which is just cutting side to side, and you can slow it down or you can go really fast. You can add a band around their waist, which is going to overload the eccentric, the coming back portion of the exercise, which is really good. I mean, if you're trying to make a quick cut, the faster you can break out of that cut, more than times than not, the quicker you can get around somebody, right? So you're trying to be quick with that quick plant of the foot and then redirect. And so that's like some examples of the different categories that we use.
I got you. And you mentioned one of my favorite, which is we talk a lot about working lateral here because the hips, I mean, physical therapists make a lot of money off of hips. And it's because we stopped at any kind of lateral movement. Now, I've said this several times on other podcasts that all the cardio equipment all the way up to 2014 was forward and backwards. You know, you think about a bike, a treadmill, an elliptical going forward and backward. You don't think about any kind of lateral movement, not until Octane Fitness came out with the lateral legs and going sideways. And so lateral is something we do a lot of hip work in here. And one of my favorites, and you just mentioned it, the lateral balance, but that we use this, and we use a lot during COVID with our online, the companies that we're working with online, individuals working with online, and that's just skaters.
Yeah,
You know, it looks like you're speed skating actually and jumping from side to side. But how much that engaged that medial glute, and all I could think, I never played baseball, and all I could think was, wow, taking off from a bag. If I develop these muscles, how explosive, or if I'm in a hot box situation, how fast I can change direction.
Right, yeah.
You know, so that's what you were talking about there.
So yeah, there's a big carryover, especially like you just said with our general clients too. I mean, we implement very similar the rotation of, you know, vertical, horizontal, and lateral with them as well, because you know, the more variety you have, the more exposure you're going to get to those demands, and you know, we need that. We need that lateral exposure, because the more, like we said, the more you train it, the more your body's going to be accustomed to it and adapt to it, and then that's only going to help improve your quality of life whenever you face those situations where you got to move laterally. You're playing in the backyard with your kid, and they're trying to run around with the football, and then you're like, man, I hadn't run side to side in a minute, so you know, your hips start hurting. So you know, it's all good.
Well, and you touched on, of course, one of my favorite areas, and that is translating it not only from our athletes, which we have a ton of. In fact, by the way, we I don't want to mention her name here, I don't want to embarrass her, but we have our swimmer that just graduated last year in school. She has her first meet this coming weekend.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and say, Clark, good luck to you. Hope you do fantastic. So, but also our all the way up into our senior population about some sort of plyometrics. Think about this. There's not a single time, there's not a single year in your life where you haven't fallen. I mean,
literally, as you're walking, it's a controlled fall.
Period.
You take a step, you're controlling the fall to take the next step.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and this is where two things that we're developing in these types of movements, lateral especially. I'm speaking about that. Vertical, we've got a lot going on as far as training there. But the reason I bring it up the lateral is the fact that, okay, first thing, we're building up the muscle so that, or strengthening the muscle so that you can move the leg out to catch yourself. But the other thing is that developing that part of your cerebellum where it's used to, that neuro pathway commuting where the brain goes, hey, leg, move to the side, is honed, is sharpened by doing these exercises. Yeah,
and it's that reactivity component, right? So being able to, move that leg to the side, but also do it fast enough to catch yourself, you know?
Exactly.
And so that's why, you know, we train that, is because, you know, if you're not in a habit of moving fast and being able to, like we said before, that quick twitch, right? When you stumble and you got to quickly just drop and catch yourself. If you're not used to that, then, you know, that's when a nasty fall happens, because, you know, you're just not able to catch yourself and react as quickly because you haven't been doing that. So there's a lot of carryover, not just athletics, but also just, you know, day-to-day life.
And you mentioned something there that we talked about in the last podcast when we were talking about plyometrics, and that is development of fast twitch muscles.
Yep.
You know, and again, that's going to athlete, kid, adult, senior. That's going to translate all the way through. So, so one of the things I give in my talks, I talk about increasing muscle mass, and I always say, okay, well then, Ken Cooper, so one of Ken Cooper's studies did it with some 70-year-olds. It's called the nursing home study, and at the end of the study, they did these 6 basic exercises, and they increased their muscle mass by 50%. And I always tell the crowd, hey, raise your hand if you want 50% more muscle mass. Well, when it comes to fast twitch muscle, raise your hand if you'd like, you know, 50% more fast twitch muscle.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're a pickleball player, if you like just going out and playing, you know, recreational pickleball, I mean, that you need to be doing plyometrics, right?
Period.
Talk about lateral cutting.
Oh, yeah.
Side to side. I mean, so, you know, it's applicable all through all stages of life, right?
There was it's interesting to say that, because there was a tennis coach, the tennis pro here in Mobile, that used to refer people to me, and I was talking to him about, you know, the old adage, you don't play tennis to get in shape, you get in shape to play tennis. And that is so true. And I said that to him, and hoping I wasn't stepping on his feelings. He said, listen, had a guy come out and want to work on his backhand. His backhand wasn't good enough, and he looked at him and said, do a favor for me, turn around. He said, turn around and face backwards to him. The pro was on the other side of the net, and he said, don't turn around till you hear the ball hit. And he was throwing it over, and it was hitting well just over the side of the net, so it was good. The guy had time to react, and so when he heard it hit, he turned around. He couldn't get to the ball.
Yeah.
And he said, well, no wonder your backhand's not very good. You know, you have no fast twitch development muscle. You can't react. You can't get there.
Right.
And so in pickleball, yes, absolutely, that would have a lot to do with it. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So we have a lot of our clients that play pickleball, and Actually, I had one come to me the other day and was like, "Hey, I'm trying to pick up pickleball. What's some stuff we can do?" And literally, one of the first exercises I put him on is just a lateral shuffle, which is what you're doing all the time: lateral shuffle back and forth in pickleball, and just mimicking those, like we just said, those same positions that you're going to be doing during the activity is all we're trying to do, and that's all training is physical preparation for the demand for the activity that you're going to be doing.
Right, and I spent the whole time talking about lateral, but that horizontal movement you're talking about has, I mean, vertical I think is pretty obvious to most people, but that horizontal, as far as increasing speed, is massive.
Right, and I think those are the two that often get, and become an afterthought, behind vertical training because, NFL Combine, everybody wants to see who's got the highest vertical, right? And I think the broad jump, often kind of gets forgotten about sometimes. People are just like, oh, broad jump, but they, kind of idolize the vertical jump and put it on a pedestal, which, I mean, the horizontal jump, the broad jump is going to be the biggest carryover, the biggest contributor to increase sprint time, which is 40-yard dash. So that is another big one. So having both of those in your training, it completes the circle, right? You don't want a missing piece of the puzzle.
Think how many clients come to us for what I call first step quickness.
Yeah,
I mean those incredible base runners, basketball.
Yep.
It's not so much about that long speed. It's that who can get those first 3 steps down.
Right.
Are the ones that are going to get the ball. And that's where that horizontal training comes there. So and we're going to talk. We got a podcast coming up later that's going to talk about some of this testing.
Yeah.
The testing as far as the jumping is concerned. So we don't want to get too much into that right now, but I know we got a podcast where we're going to be talking about that. Let's go ahead and commit her too. We got Katie that's going to have some input on that.
And get ready.
Yeah, Katie Carey is another one of our exercise coordinators and our client coordinators actually. And she has a master's degree in kinesiology, a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, also from SUNY and State University of New York and played basketball. Yep. Yeah, she's a baller. Yep. And we're gonna have to adjust the camera here because she's taller than both of us. Yep. So we'll have her coming on also. So anything else we left out as far as the jumping is concerned?
I don't think so. Yeah. So next week we'll kind of get into, all right, yeah. So we've got these different categories, how do we track them at Personal Edge and what are the benefits for doing that? And yeah, we're going to bring Katie on just to kind of get a little bit of her background in collegiate, basketball and kind of some stuff they did. So I'm really excited for that episode because you'll get to kind of see a little more of the behind the scenes and the practical application behind it. Right.
And she had I didn't tell you about this. We got a consult coming in. Sister of a former one of our former athletes is coming in for vertical, and we'll be, of course, working with you, but also we're working with Katie. So
awesome.
We'll tell you more about that coming up next week. So I appreciate you joining us today. Let me tell you how to get in touch with the show in case you have any questions about this. It's area code 251-278-3343. Reach out to me at Garrett@personaledgefitness.com. If you have questions for Charlie at personaledgefitness.com. That's our website and our Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter at Team P if you have questions concerning plyometrics or anything in fitness and wellness. And jumping, plyometrics, it's not just jumping anymore. It's a lot more to it. Not only does it help our athletes, helps you through all parts of the long-term athletic development, all the way into our seniors, and it happens to be one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see y'all next time.